In the 2020 draft lottery, the Bulls, after a couple years of tanking for either guys like Luka Doncic or Zion Williamson, had finally received a bit of luck and moved up into the top 4. And even though the 2020 draft class was considered not to be very deep, a number 4 pick is an opportunity to pick up a player who could one day become a franchise cornerstone. And on draft night, when the Bulls were on the clock, they made a pretty surprising move by drafting Patrick Williams out of Florida State with the number 4 overall pick. And the reason it was surprising was because leading up to the draft, Patrick Williams was not considered to be a top 5 pick. In fact, a couple weeks leading up to it, he wasn't even projected to go into the lottery, let alone a top 5 pick. Patrick was actually ranked 29th as a recruit out of high school of the 2019 class, but in the week landing up to the draft, Patrick's stock rose dramatically when teams started to notice his handles, strong defense, improved offensive game, strength, and physique for a player who was ripe for coming into the NBA. And for the Bulls, they didn't want to pass up on a chance to draft a potential star in the making in an otherwise underwhelming draft class. Well, fast forward 2 years, with Patrick Williams being in his 3rd season, things have not quite panned out the way the Bulls had imagined, as Patrick Williams, now 21 years old, has still yet to show much progress since entering the league. In fact, it's even starting to look like he's regressing. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about how concerned should the Chicago Bulls be about Patrick Williams and his future, and how they should approach his development going forward. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I remember on the day the Bulls drafted Patrick Williams in the 2020 draft and not having a clue who this kid was. I'll admit, I don't watch college basketball. I don't follow along the draft combine that much, but what I did know was that Patrick Williams was not on the radar to be the number 4 pick. The guys that I was looking at that were thought to be projected to go in that range were Deni Avdija, potentially LaMelo Ball if he fell out of the top 3. Obi Toppin was one name that was talked about, Isaac Okoro, Killian Hayes, but Patrick was not on my radar. So when the Bulls drafted him, I had to do research on the kid to see what he was about and what he was good at. Now, shortly after the draft, there was some pickup game footage of Patrick going up against other NBA players where he was absolutely dominating. And when I saw that right away, I loved the pick, because although he was raw and a project player, I didn't mind it because the Bulls at the time were still in the process of rebuilding themselves around a young core of Lauri Markkanen, Lavine, Wendell Carter Jr., and Coby White. Bringing in another young player that had loads of potential for the future, that didn't bother me. And after his rookie campaign, Patrick Williams looked solid. I wouldn't say it was a stellar rookie year by any means, but he played very well for a 19-year-old who was tasked with guarding some of the league's best players like LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Giannis, and he was holding his own. Patrick actually started his whole rookie season and finished it with 2nd team All-Rookie honors, averaging 9.2 points per game on 48% shooting, 4.6 rebounds, and 1.4 assists. What was unfortunate was that in just the 5th game of his sophomore season, Patrick was fouled hard going up for a dunk and broke his wrist, which sidelined him for most of the season, impeding that development that the Bulls had for him going into his 2nd year. Patrick did return at the end of the season, but only played 17 games and didn't really show a ton of progress from his rookie year. Now, going into this season, after a disappointing end of the year for the Bulls last year, the Bulls had high hopes for Patrick to take that next step, that 3rd-year leap that you see from most NBA players, where they finally start to feel comfortable in the flow and pace of the NBA game. And although it's still very early, probably a little too early to start panicking, which is probably how this video is going to come across, early signs of how he's progressing this season are not good. In fact, it's actually pretty bad, as Pat has essentially been a non-factor for the Bulls and has even been forced to be pulled out early and remain on the bench, while the Bulls have gone with guys like Javonte Green and Derrick Jones Jr. at the 4 spot. Now, I think the question that is on everyone's mind is, what is going on with Patrick? What happened that we're seeing such a dramatic drop-off from a kid we saw in his rookie season, and a guy the front office saw so much promise in? Because like I said, even though he wasn't amazing in his rookie year, where he really wowed you to say, yeah, this kid is going to be a future superstar, he still looked good and was impressive enough that as a fan you could get excited about him for the future. The injury in the 2nd season, that was just unfortunate. There was really nothing you could do about that. But even when Pat was playing, whether before or after getting injured last season, he still just looked very timid, very deferential, not active, not aggressive. And to start off this season, that has been heightened even more. So what happened? Well, I do think it is important to put things into context. You have to remember that when Patrick was drafted to the Bulls, this was a team that was not very good. Sure, they had playoff aspirations, which they failed to reach, but this was a team that was still being built, as I mentioned before. So the pressure to perform wasn't as heightened as it is now because the talent level on the team wasn't that high. Patrick was considered one of the better players on the roster. He was able to get more touches, more opportunities, and then the Bulls front office overhauled the roster to really go from being a rebuilding team to a team that was looking to contend now by trading for Vucevic, bringing in Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan, letting some of those younger core players go like Larry Markin and Wendell Carter Jr. That's a big adjustment for a 20-year-old player who is now being thrust into a role where he's the starting power forward on a team filled with veterans who are looking to win now. That completely changes his role, that completely changes how he develops as a player, and it doesn't help when you have the pressure on you of being the number 4 overall pick that the fans are hoping for you to one day turn into a star. But even despite all of that, you look at a guy like Dosunmu, who was drafted to a team that was already looking to contend now, who was thrust into a role where he had to step up when guys were out due to injury, and he took the challenge head on and thrived. Granted, he wasn't a number 4 pick, he was a second round pick, so the pressure on him isn't the same, but Ayo is seizing the moment, playing with a ton of confidence and learning as he goes. And you would have thought you'd be seeing the same thing from Patrick Williams despite a big adjustment to his role and the state of the team and roster. Here's my issue with Patrick, and I mentioned this briefly before in prior videos. It's not that he's not putting up shots. It's not that he's still navigating his NBA journey, which takes some time for players. It's the fact that when you watch him, just him alone, regardless of where the ball is, he looks lost on the court on most possessions. He's not moving, standing around. When he does move, it's usually not to the right spot. He rarely cuts to the basket. He rarely is getting under the basket trying to box out for a rebound because he's always hanging out in the corner. And when Patrick is actually trying to be a little more aggressive and get more touches, when he's trying to create his own shot, they're just not good looks. He'll dribble a few quick dribbles between the legs, take a mid-range jumper with a man in his face while guys aren't under the basket, and he ends up missing them. Patrick so far this season, again, it's only 4 games, so take that for what you will, it's a small sample size, but so far he's shooting 32% from the field compared to his career average of 48%, and he's shooting 20% from 3 while his career average is 40%. It's on low volume, but still a pretty big drop-off. And get this, Patrick Williams hasn't had a single assist in the first 4 games of the season. I mean, look, I know he's young. Maybe the expectations were too high for this kid going into the season, and the pressure can really get to a player, but come on now. The way Patrick has played so far this year is unacceptable. He's been MIA to the point where you sometimes don't even realize he's on the court when he is there, because everything is going on around him, and he's not getting involved on offense. And from a defensive perspective, I mean, that was the one thing about Patrick that people were touting a lot, especially in his rookie year, that even though he had a lot to work on for his offensive game, he's still a very accomplished defender. And that is going to serve him well in becoming a great two-way player one day. Like if Patrick's offensive game still wasn't progressing, but he was being a lockdown defender and improving that aspect of his game, I actually wouldn't care if that's how he was showing up in his 3rd year. But even on defense, Patrick has been a non-factor, missing assignments, falling asleep on switches when defending the pick and roll, not getting up in shooters' faces like we saw him do in his rookie year. He has 2 steals and 2 blocks so far this season. That's it. And honestly, all of this, I can't figure it out because it's pretty rare that you see a player just not progress whatsoever for being a top 4 pick. In fact, you actually see them regressing. Sure, it's happened here and there, but it's rare. So what is it? I don't know. My guess is it has to be a confidence thing. Like even when he has the ball in his hands, he just looks nervous. He knows everyone is watching him, wanting to be that next star, not wanting him to just be the next busted draft pick. I'm sure he's heard all the Kawhi comparisons, even though I think we can all agree that is not going to happen. And I think now that Patrick is starting to get heat from a lot of fans for underperforming, and they're starting to write the guy off, not myself, but some fans are, whereas before, Bulls fans, for the most part, were really rallying behind Patrick and supporting him at every turn. I think that has had an impact on his psyche and confidence, and with every passing game where he disappoints, that confidence worsens and worsens. We just really need a couple of big games from Patrick to boost his confidence and to get him going again. I mean, when you're having a bad game and after bad game and the fans are talking about it, the media is talking about it, I'm sure that can't sit well with a player, especially when these guys are so young too. And look, we really need Patrick. We need him to step up in a big way for this Bulls team on both ends of the floor. It'll make the team that much stronger, especially when the East is so competitive as it is. I've said multiple times, I think it makes so much sense, so much more sense to have him come off the bench. Sure, that might be a demotion in and of itself, might hurt his confidence even more, but playing in the second unit, going up against the opposing team's reserves, it'll enable him to get more touches, more shot attempts, and I really think it'll benefit the Bulls as well as having a guy like Javonte who fits in the starting unit. I really hope to see that change made. I'm actually curious how long Billy is going to let this, continue going on while Patrick is playing the way that he is. I guess we'll find out later tonight when the Bulls take on the Pacers, so don't forget to join the live chat here on the channel that I have every game. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.